There is a quiet truth most people overlook. The life you long for is not waiting somewhere in the future. It is already unfolding beneath your awareness. Long before the outer world reflects your desires, the inner world begins to reorganize itself. Subtle shifts in perception, unexpected discomfort, recurring thoughts, and moments of restlessness are not obstacles. They are signals that something within you is aligning. When a desire is truly ready to emerge, it no longer feels like impatience. It feels like inevitability. You may notice that certain habits lose their grip, old identities feel restrictive, and paths that once seemed certain no longer satisfy you. This is not confusion, it is preparation. The psyche clears space before something meaningful can take form. What feels like emptiness is often the womb of transformation. Your unconscious does not rush. It moves with precision. Every delay, every pause, and every detour serves a deeper intelligence that understands timing better than the conscious mind. While you try to force outcomes, life gently redirects you inward, asking for integration rather than control. When inner alignment is incomplete, manifestation remains quiet. When alignment is achieved, life responds without effort. Notice how certain opportunities now resonate differently. What once felt exciting may feel hollow, while something unfamiliar feels strangely compelling. This is the inner compass recalibrating. Your desires evolve as you do. The more honestly you observe yourself, without judgment or resistance, the faster the outer world rearranges to match that clarity. Manifestation is not created through constant striving, but through coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions no longer contradict each other, reality has no choice but to respond. The world mirrors inner truth, not spoken affirmations. What you are becoming internally determines what can arrive externally. Trust the subtle signals. Trust the discomfort that invites growth. Trust the silence that precedes clarity. Your deepest desires are not delayed. They are already in motion, waiting only for you to meet them at the level of inner readiness. Inner change always comes before anything meaningful appears in the external world, even though this sequence is easy to overlook. Most people assume that life shifts first and the inner state follows, yet the opposite is almost always true. Long before circumstances transform, something subtle begins to move within the psyche. Perceptions start to change, emotional reactions soften or intensify, and familiar patterns lose their sense of certainty. These shifts often go unnoticed because they do not announce themselves dramatically. They unfold quietly, reshaping the inner landscape while the outer world appears unchanged. When inner change begins, it often feels like restlessness rather than clarity. Old goals may no longer inspire the same energy, and achievements that once seemed essential start to feel hollow. This is not a sign of failure or ingratitude, but an indication that the inner orientation is adjusting. The psyche senses that what once fit is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. As this inner reorganization takes place, the external world has not yet caught up, creating a temporary sense of being out of place or suspended between versions of the self. This phase can be uncomfortable because the mind seeks immediate confirmation. It wants evidence in the form of visible results. However, inner change does not operate on the same timeline as external events. It requires a period of integration, where new insights, values, and emotional responses settle into the nervous system. During this time, the outer world often remains static, testing patience and trust. Yet this stillness is not stagnation. It is the necessary pause that allows inner clarity to become stable rather than reactive. As inner change deepens, perception itself begins to shift. You may notice that you respond differently to situations that once triggered strong reactions. Boundaries become clearer, and choices feel less forced. This altered way of seeing subtly changes behavior, even without conscious effort. You speak differently, listen more carefully, and act with greater consistency. These small internal adjustments accumulate, and over time they begin to influence the environment around you. People respond differently, opportunities arise naturally, and circumstances rearrange themselves in ways that feel almost coincidental. External manifestation is not something imposed upon life, but something that emerges from alignment. When thoughts, emotions, and actions are no longer in conflict, reality reflects that coherence. This is why forced action often leads to resistance, while aligned action feels strangely effortless. The outer world mirrors the inner state because it responds to what is consistently embodied, not what is merely desired. Inner change sets the pattern, and the external world follows that pattern once it becomes stable. What often appears as delay is simply the time required for inner transformation to mature. Rushing this process can create outcomes that feel empty or unstable because they are built on an incomplete foundation. When inner change is allowed to unfold fully, external manifestation arrives with a sense of rightness rather than urgency. It feels natural, almost inevitable, as though life is confirming something that has already been decided within. Discomfort and restlessness are often misunderstood as signs that something is wrong, yet they frequently indicate that an inner alignment is taking place. When life is no longer congruent with who you are becoming, the psyche creates tension to draw attention to that mismatch. This tension is not meant to punish or discourage, it is meant to awaken awareness. Comfort usually arises when nothing is changing, but growth requires movement, and movement almost always produces friction. Restlessness appears when the old structure of the self can no longer contain new awareness. Habits, beliefs, and routines that once provided stability begin to feel restrictive. You may find yourself questioning choices you once accepted without thought, or feeling unsettled by situations that previously felt safe. This inner agitation is not a signal that you have chosen the wrong path. It is evidence that the path is widening. The psyche resists stagnation and uses discomfort as a mechanism to encourage expansion. Discomfort also arises when unconscious material begins to surface. As deeper values shift, unresolved emotions and neglected parts of the self seek recognition. This can feel confusing because there is no clear external cause. Nothing obvious may be wrong, yet a persistent sense of unease remains. Rather than indicating failure, this state suggests that inner truth is pressing toward consciousness. The mind often labels this as anxiety or dissatisfaction, but at its core it is an invitation to integrate what has been ignored or postponed. When alignment begins, the familiar loses its ability to satisfy. Achievements may still be present, relationships may still function, yet a subtle emptiness emerges. This emptiness is not a lack but a clearing. The psyche withdraws energy from what no longer reflects the evolving self, creating space for something more authentic to take shape. Without this withdrawal, true alignment would never occur, because there would be no room for it. Many people attempt to escape discomfort by forcing positivity or by returning to old patterns that promise temporary relief. However, doing so often intensifies restlessness over time. Alignment cannot be negotiated with distraction. It requires presence and honesty. When discomfort is observed rather than resisted, it begins to reveal its purpose. It points toward values that want expression, boundaries that need strengthening, and directions that feel more truth. Full, even if they are unfamiliar, restlessness becomes a compass when it is understood correctly. It signals that the inner world is recalibrating and that the external life has not yet adjusted to match it. This gap creates tension, but it also carries momentum. Every moment of unease is shaping clarity beneath the surface, refining perception and intention. As alignment deepens, the restlessness gradually transforms into resolve, and the discomfort gives way to a quiet confidence rooted in authenticity. What once felt like failure reveals itself as evidence that growth is already underway. Delays are often experienced as frustration, yet they serve a deeper function that operates beyond conscious awareness. When something does not arrive as quickly as expected, the immediate assumption is that effort has failed or that circumstances are working against you. In reality, delays frequently indicate that an unconscious preparation is taking place. The psyche understands timing in a way the conscious mind cannot, because it perceives not only what is desired, but what is required to sustain it. Before an outcome can manifest in a stable and meaningful way, the inner structure must be capable of holding it. This preparation happens quietly, through subtle changes in perception, emotional resilience, and self-understanding. During a delay, you may find yourself confronting limitations, doubts, or unresolved patterns that would have undermined what you are waiting for had it arrived too soon. The pause creates the conditions necessary for integration, allowing inner contradictions to soften and awareness to deepen. Precise timing is not about convenience, it is about coherence. The unconscious moves in rhythms that prioritize wholeness over speed, while the turn is essential, even though it can feel uncomfortable. It reveals motivations that are no longer authentic and desires that need refinement. What initially feels like stagnation gradually becomes a process of clarification, reshaping intentions so they align more closely with the evolving self. Delays also recalibrate expectations. They strip away fantasy and reveal what is truly being sought. When something is delayed long enough, superficial desire loses energy, while deeper intention remains. This filtering process ensures that what eventually arrives is aligned with genuine values rather than momentary impulses. The unconscious uses time as a testing ground, strengthening commitment where it is real and dissolving it where it is not. As preparation continues, the outer world begins to respond subtly. New perspectives emerge, different opportunities appear, and choices become clearer. These shifts are often recognized only in hindsight, when it becomes apparent that the delay was not empty time but necessary groundwork. When the moment finally arrives, it feels natural rather than forced, as though events are unfolding in recognition of an inner readiness that has already been established. What appears as delay is often precise timing in disguise. It reflects a deeper intelligence that understands sequence, balance, and capacity. By allowing unconscious preparation to complete its work, outcomes arrive with a sense of inevitability and stability, confirming that waiting was not a setback but an essential part of becoming ready. Old identities dissolve not because they were wrong, but because they have completed their purpose. Every identity is formed as a response to a particular stage of life, shaped by circumstances, expectations, and survival needs. Over time, what once provided structure can begin to feel limiting. When this happens, the psyche initiates a quiet withdrawal of energy from those roles, beliefs, and self-definitions. This withdrawal often feels like confusion or loss, yet it is a necessary step in making space for something more aligned to emerge. As an identity begins to dissolve, familiar reference points lose their clarity. You may no longer recognize yourself in the way you think, speak, or react. Goals that once defined your sense of worth may feel irrelevant, and roles you performed effortlessly can start to feel heavy. This is not a breakdown of self, but a loosening of outdated structures. The psyche does not erase identity abruptly, it gradually softens its grip, allowing awareness to detach from what no longer reflects inner truth. This phase is often accompanied by discomfort because identity provides psychological safety. Even a limiting self-image offers predictability. When it begins to dissolve, the mind seeks certainty and may attempt to restore the old patterns. Yet returning to them rarely brings relief. What once felt natural now feels constricting, revealing that the inner shift is irreversible. The tension between who you were and who you are becoming creates a sense of being in between, where the old no longer fits and the new is not yet fully formed. In this in-between state, emptiness can emerge. This emptiness is frequently misinterpreted as a lack of purpose or direction, but it is actually a clearing. The psyche removes what is unnecessary to allow new values, perceptions, and ways of being to take root. Without this clearing, new realities would have no space to develop. Just as a field must be cleared before new growth can occur, the inner world must release outdated identities to support authentic transformation. As old identities dissolve, perception changes. You begin to notice different opportunities, respond differently to challenges, and feel drawn toward experiences that once seemed irrelevant or intimidating. These shifts are subtle at first, yet they signal that a new internal orientation is forming. Behavior naturally adjusts without force, reflecting an emerging sense of self that feels less performative and more grounded. The external world responds to this shift, mirroring the new reality through changed circumstances and relationships. The dissolution of identity is not destruction but renewal. It allows life to reorganize around a deeper alignment rather than habitual roles. What replaces the old identity is not something constructed through effort, but something that emerges organically once the space has been made. In this way, the release of who you were becomes the foundation for the reality you are ready to live, one that feels truthful, stable, and quietly inevitable. Manifestation does not respond to intensity of effort, repetition of desire, or forceful control. It responds to inner coherence, the state in which thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned in the same direction. When there is conflict within, the outer world reflects that fragmentation through resistance, delays, or outcomes that feel unstable. Force arises when the conscious mind tries to overpower inner contradiction rather than resolve it, and this is why forced manifestation often leads to exhaustion instead of fulfillment. Inner incoherence appears in subtle ways. A person may want change while simultaneously fearing its consequences, or desire abundance while holding deep discomfort around responsibility or visibility. On the surface, intention seems clear, but beneath it, emotional and psychological resistance remains active. No amount of pushing can override this internal split. Life responds not to what is verbally affirmed, but to what is consistently embodied. Until the inner contradiction is acknowledged and integrated, manifestation remains inconsistent or distorted. Coherence begins with honesty rather than effort. When thoughts align with emotions, and emotions align with behavior, a natural stability forms. This stability removes the need to control outcomes, because actions arise from clarity instead of anxiety. In this state, choices feel simpler, boundaries feel natural, and direction emerges without strain. The absence of force is not passivity, it is precision. Energy is no longer wasted on inner conflict and becomes available for aligned movement. Force often comes from impatience and mistrust of timing. When results do not appear quickly, the mind tightens its grip, pushing harder and demanding certainty. This tension communicates a lack of alignment, reinforcing the very resistance it is trying to overcome. The more one attempts to control external conditions, the further one moves from the internal coherence required for meaningful change. Manifestation does not obey pressure, it mirrors state of being. When coherence deepens, behavior changes without deliberate effort. You naturally take actions that support what you desire because those actions feel congruent rather than imposed. There is less need for motivation because resistance has dissolved. This is why aligned action feels quiet and steady, while forced action feels frantic and unsustainable. The external world responds to this steadiness through opportunities that arrive with less struggle and greater timing accuracy. Manifestation becomes inevitable when inner coherence stabilizes. Outcomes no longer feel chased but met. The sense of effort diminishes, replaced by responsiveness and trust. What arrives feels appropriate rather than overwhelming, confirming that the inner structure is capable of holding it. In this way, manifestation is not something achieved through domination of circumstances, but something that unfolds naturally when the inner world is no longer divided against itself. What feels like waiting is often misunderstood as inactivity or delay, yet it is frequently a period of quiet preparation. When life seems to pause, the surface level shows little movement, but beneath that stillness something essential is taking shape. The mind, accustomed to measuring progress through visible results, interprets this phase as stagnation. In reality, the psyche uses these intervals to reorganize, strengthen, and clarify what is forming before it can appear in the outer world. Waiting creates space where unnecessary motion falls away. Without constant forward movement, attention turns inward, revealing patterns, motivations, and expectations that normally remain hidden. This inward shift can feel uncomfortable because it removes distraction. Old ambitions may lose urgency, and familiar structures may no longer provide reassurance. Yet this loss of certainty is not emptiness, it is refinement. The psyche sheds what is no longer aligned, preparing the ground for something more authentic to emerge. During this period, emotional resilience is quietly developed. Experiences that once triggered impatience or frustration begin to soften their grip. This is not because circumstances have changed, but because the internal response is evolving. Readiness is not only about acquiring new opportunities, it is about developing the capacity to meet them without collapsing or overcompensating. Waiting builds this capacity through subtle lessons in restraint, observation, and trust. Becoming ready also involves recalibrating desire. What is meant to arrive cannot do so until it aligns with deeper values rather than surface-level wants. Time allows desire to mature, stripping away fantasy and revealing what truly matters. What remains after prolonged waiting carries a different quality, less urgency, more clarity. This refined desire has endurance, and it signals that the inner world is approaching coherence. Externally, waiting may appear uneventful, but internally it is often marked by shifts in perception. You may notice changes in how you interpret situations, the kind of conversations that draw your interest, or the standards you hold for yourself and others. These changes indicate that readiness is forming. The external outcome cannot arrive until these internal adjustments stabilize, because without them, the outcome would either be mishandled or fail to satisfy. When readiness is complete, movement resumes naturally. What once felt delayed begins to unfold with surprising ease. The waiting is recognized in hindsight as necessary rather than wasted. It ensured that when the moment arrived you could meet it without force or fear. In this way, waiting is not the absence of progress, but the invisible phase where becoming catches up with what is meant to come. And so, if you find yourself in a season where nothing seems to move, resist the urge to doubt your path. What is unfolding now cannot yet be seen, but it is being shaped with care and precision. Every moment of waiting is strengthening your capacity to receive what is meant for you. When readiness meets timing, life moves without resistance, and what arrives feels neither rushed nor late, but exactly right. Trust this quiet becoming. It is the final preparation before alignment turns into reality.